Good afternoon. My name is Gillian Balaban and I'm Senior Coordinator Governance Relations at GRI. Welcome to this meeting of the Global Sustainability Standards Board, known by its acronym the GSSB, held on 15 June 2023. This virtual meeting is being hosted from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Please note that all public GSSB meetings are being recorded and you can find the audio recording on the GSSB webpage along with high-level summaries of previous GSSB meetings. Present from the Secretariat today are Bastien Buck, Chief of Standards, Laura Espinach, Head of Technical Development Services, and Matthew Dunn, Manager Standards. I will now start with a roll call. Anna Nefedova.
Present.
Thank you. Corley LaRue.
Present.
Chalandra De Silva.
Present.
Deborah Ing.
Present.
Thank you. Galia Tosonkova.
Present.
Julia Genuadi.
Present.
Jeff Robertson.
Present.
Joseph Martin.
Present.
Pete Colley.
Present.
And GSSB Chair Carol Adams. Carol, we can't hear you.
Present, and thank you very much, Jimmy, for starting us off.
Thank you. We just got a couple of apologies to do, so I'll do those. GSSB members Ganga Charan Sharma, Laura Dana Carter, and Vincent Kong sent their apologies. GSSB member Kim Schumacher and Jennifer Prinsing may join the call later. I will now hand over to the Chair, Carol Adams, to open the meeting.
Thank you very much, Gillian, and welcome everybody. It's good to see you all. Our first item today is to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. I might come back to that later when we hopefully have a quorum. But were there any comments on those minutes? Any concerns about those? No? Okay, thank you. So the next item is paper 2, the relationship between the GRI standards and other reporting frameworks. And this is the work that we have been doing on box 1, which we discussed at our April meeting. So I'll hand over to Laura to explain where we've got with that one. Please, Laura.
Thank you, Carol, and hello to all GSSB members. So as Carol introduced, this session is a follow-up to the discussion that we had in April on how the GRI standards relate to ongoing developments in the reporting landscape. In particular, the upcoming standards by the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board, and the European Sustainability Reporting Standards that are being developed in the European Union. Next slide, please. So to inform today's discussion, we have prepared a discussion paper, which is item 2 from the list of agenda items. And item 2 provides some of the context for this discussion, which we already introduced during the April meeting. But in short, as you know, GRI1 Foundation currently explains the link between sustainability reporting and financial and value creation reporting. And it does this within a call-out box, which is box 1. And since the release of GRI1 in 2021, 2 years ago, the reporting landscape has significantly evolved. And that necessitates, first of all, to understand how the GRI standards relate to these new developments, but also to identify any contents in the standards themselves that could potentially necessitate updating. So to inform the GSSB's position on this matter, the Standards Division drafted a text based on the existing text of box 1 in order to articulate how the standards relate to these new developments. And we presented this to the GSSB for discussion back in April. And the version that we discussed back in April was also shared with both the ISSB and EFRAG for comment. So the Standards Division has since then revised the text based on the feedback that we have received from the GSSB, and an updated version of the text is presented in item 2 for discussion today. Next slide, please. Good. You can find an overview of the key changes that we have made to the text in lines 66 to 88 of item 2. And as mentioned, the changes aim to address GSSB feedback, but we have also made some other changes to improve the overall clarity of the text. So among the changes that we have made, for example, are that we have clarified that impacts are one source, but not the only source of risks and opportunities. And we have added an example of risks and opportunities that do not come from the impacts of the organization, but from impacts of others, which was something that the GSSB had requested for clarity. We have also provided more guidance on how the GRI standards and the IFRS sustainability disclosure standards can be used together. And we have also clarified that the material topics that are determined with the GRI standards cannot be deprioritized by applying materiality definitions of other reporting standards. It is important to note that the text that we are presenting today is not yet the final text for the GRI standards. Any proposed changes to the standards need to go through the GSSB due process protocol, and a project to start those changes has not yet formally started. Also important to note that this text is not an official position of the ISSB or EFRAG. The text has been prepared by the Standards Division with the aim of informing the GSSB's own position on this matter. In terms of next steps, the Standards Division will continue to develop the text further based on additional feedback from the GSSB, also based on the final versions of the ISSB standards and the European standards, which are expected to be published in June and July respectively. We're also developing technical questions and answers together with the ISSB, and that work will also continue to inform the text. And we will also share this new version with both ISSB and EFRAG for comment. So all of these inputs we will need to continue to take into account as we discuss this work going forward. We have received some comments from GSSB members ahead of the meeting, so thank you very much for those. And at this point, I will turn it over to Carol to invite those comments as well as any other comments from GSSB members. And I would also be happy to clarify any specific questions that GSSB members have about the text and the latest changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Lara. I am aware that Shalendra has questions and comments on this, well, suggestions. I'm not aware of any others at this point, but I will invite points from others. Shalendra, would you like to kick off the discussion with the points you raised over email, please?
Sure, Carol, thank you. Laura and Carol, I think after I got Laura's email, I think things are a bit clearer. I think where I come from is that, okay, so when you say right at the end that the GRI standards cannot be deprioritized or the material topics cannot be deprioritized based on the materiality of other frameworks, that's absolutely fine. Where I come from though is when we, in that previous sentence, when we say that the GRI standards is independent of considering sustainable related risks and opportunities, and in the even previous sentence, we say while most, if not all, of the impacts of an organization will eventually translate into risks and opportunities, in my mind, it creates a bit of confusion that we first say that impacts do create risks and opportunities, and then we say it's independent of risks and opportunities. And it's with that in mind, a team that I thought of that we should basically segregate or probably separate out these two risks and opportunities, because the GRI impacts, if you take it, we basically prioritize the GRI impacts, and we prioritize them by looking at the risks and opportunities and the impact that could occur in the future, which is the risk basically of those impacts. So technically we are looking on GRI's impacts arise in terms of a risk or opportunity to the organization. In the sense, we also, for example, in our DMAs, we would, as a reporter, we would say why this impact is material or why we chose to report on it. And that gives the context or the risks of it. Now, if we were to say we are independent of all the sustainable risks and opportunities, then does that reduce the relevance of the GRI standards is my concern. And which is why I'm recommending that we kind of ring fence those, that the risk and opportunity that we are trying to leave out to be financial risks and opportunities, which is what I believe ISSB and EFRAG are basically saying with regard to being sustainability related financial disclosures, whereas we are impact disclosures.
Okay, thank you. I think you're referring to lines 136 and 137. I think the meaning is there, and Lara and Bastian can correct me if I'm wrong, is that consideration of the impacts is independent of considering the risks and opportunities. So you must consider material impacts, regardless of whether you, I don't know, Lara, can you help us with this?
No, that is correct. So the intent when this text was originally developed was to say that, well, first of all, we acknowledge that all impacts will eventually result in risks and opportunities, but even in cases where they don't, or where the company determines that it doesn't, if those impacts are material, they still need to be reported.
But that, absolutely. But my question there, Laura, is then how would materiality come into play? So how would you determine or prioritize those material topics or material impacts? Yes, if you don't consider the opportunities?
Yeah, so the guidance that we have in our GRI 3 standard for prioritizing impacts is based on the guidance that is provided by the authoritative instruments on due diligence, which is by considering the severity of the impact on others and also the likelihood of impacts on others. And in those frameworks, the consideration of risks and opportunities to the company itself are not a consideration either.
So even if a company thinks that there aren't any risks and opportunities attached to material impacts, we're asking them to report the material impacts, if I've understood that.
Precisely, yeah.
I'll come back to you, Chalendra, but I'll just first go to Corley to see if she has a point on this issue.
Thank you, Carol. I think, you know, for me, there is an additional granularity that that I'd just like to clarify as well, if my understanding is correct. I mean, when we talk about risks and opportunities, we almost use it in a catch-all sense. But in the context of differentiating between the GRI standards focusing on outward impacts versus the IFRS standards focusing on inward financial consequences for the organization, wouldn't it help perhaps if we introduce the same distinction as regards risks and opportunities? Because when you're considering impact, there might also be risks and opportunities of impact, if you understand what I'm saying. We're not only talking, and Laura, you just kind of alluded to it now in your comments, that the GRI doesn't cover risks and opportunities for the organization. But when you're thinking about impact, are you not also considering risks and opportunities to either, the risk that there may be impact and opportunities to avoid negative impact or enhance positive impacts? So I'm just wondering if using risk and opportunities is kind of a broad catch-all term, we're missing a little bit of granularity, and that might be contributing to some of the confusion, perhaps. I hope I'm making sense.
I'm not quite sure I follow that, but let's see if we can get through it. When we spoke about this in April, the GSSB was of the view that the material impacts of an organization on its stakeholders did over time present risks or opportunities for the organization. But not all organizations might recognize those risks and opportunities, you know, of the impacts. They might assume there aren't going to be any risks or opportunities from those impacts. So we're making it clear we want them to disclose the material impacts on stakeholders, regardless of whether they think or in what time frame they think it's going to present risks and opportunities.
Could we, hi, this is Deborah. I'm just wondering, it seems we keep talking risks and opportunities, I think the thing that seems to be missing then is distinguishing between the two risks and opportunities we're talking about. And maybe it's a matter of adding material risks and opportunities, or maybe it's risks and opportunities to and from the organization to kind of make that distinction. I think we just need something to clarify, you know, what the distinction is, because it does sound a little bit circular, you know. You know, hey, it might eventually translate, but we're independent of considering these risks and opportunities. I think that it's just missing that clarity on I mean, we just say what we mean there. I think we're trying to avoid a word of materiality or impacts to and from the organization. Perhaps we should just add it in there for clarity.
So are we saying that the wording isn't clear, that we want them to report the impacts regardless of whether they think it's material opportunities? Is that what you're saying, Corley and Deborah?
Yes.
Okay, and Corley?
Carol, sorry, just repeat what we want them to report material impacts.
So we're wanting the organizations to report material impacts, but I think what you're saying is it's not clear that we're asking them to report the material impacts, regardless of whether they think or over what time frame they think those impacts might lead to risks and opportunities for the organization.
Yes, so I mean, I think we definitely want them to report on material impacts. I think where it does get murky is when we're saying that material impacts could result in risk and opportunity over time, but we're not being clear how we want them to deal with that risk and opportunity. And to me, it speaks a little bit to who does the risk and opportunity relate to. Does it relate to the organization or to, you know, the society or the environment where the impact is being felt, if you understand what I'm saying.
I see, yes. So what we're trying to do here is draw that connection between the impact reporting under GRI standards and then being able to report risks and opportunities under the IFRS-S standards.
Yes.
Lara, would you like to, Lara or Bastian, would you like to come in now? Or do you want to think about this some more?
No, so I can go first on this. I think the when you look at expressing there is something about risks and opportunities to the organizations, right? And risk and opportunities to stay in the same. That's how it's probably commonly referred to. It's the potential impact or a reduction of an impact, right? That is another risk and opportunity space. But it is about the impact on others, right? And that is in the language that we are handling now, that I think the feedback is that this is not clearly separated out. It is, of course, important to say that there is a continuum here, because you can look at the impacts on others, and there might be the opportunity to reduce this impact, or the risk that this impact manifests over time, right? Yes. But separate from this, the impact that you're looking at can also be a risk and opportunity to the organization. And I think that the feedback is that we need to clarify around that language. Laura, is there anything in addition that you would want to observe on this? But I think the steer is clear. We know what we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to be clear on the meaning of risk. Because if you look at the international instruments that we align with, they use impact and risk interchangeably, but in both cases, they refer to impacts or risks to society or to people or to the environment. So it's that direction of the company outwards. And one of the reasons why in the 2021 update, we decided to stick with the word impact is to avoid this confusion as to whether we are talking about risk to people or risk to the company. So that's a bit of background for the terminology that we are using in the standards at the moment. And I think the intent when we use risks and opportunities in box 1 at the moment is to refer exclusively to the risks and opportunities to the organization. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's very clear. So that's probably just a fairly minor change needed there. And I think because this is sort of under development, this will come back to the GSSB again. So we might hold off approving it and clarify that language. I think there's no rush to approve it at this stage. Does that sound acceptable to everyone? Oh, and also, were there any other points on this document? What I think it's really trying to convey is what came out in the April meeting, that we do believe that the impacts of the organisation on its stakeholders does at some point come back to present a risk or opportunity for the organisation. And that's why going through that materiality process set out in GRI 3 is an important starting point to get into the risks and opportunities that arise from an organization's impacts.
No question from me, Carol. Just a brief comment. I think the changes made were good ones and well received on my end.
Thank you. Peter?
Thank you. It's more a point of information. The European Commission did release significant revisions to the European Sustainability Reporting Standard drafts on Friday. And whilst they haven't removed any standards, they've certainly, they've weakened them by making many of them non-mandatory, that were mandatory and no longer mandatory. More standards are subject to a materiality assessment, and some are completely voluntary. And notwithstanding that, I think this text in box 1 is still appropriate in what it says about the relationship with the ESRS.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's helpful. So I think we will move on to the next item if there are no other comments on this one. So I take it, apart from just clarifying that we're talking about the risks and opportunities to the organisation, that everybody is quite happy with this text as it is. Can I just confirm that so that we don't come back on other points? Okay, I can see some nods. Anybody got anything else to raise? Colin, one more point from you.
Sorry, Carol. Just a quick comment. No, I really appreciate the work. This is not. It's a complex thing to try and clarify. So thank you for the work on that. I think definitely the direction is there. Just a quick note that it would be interesting at some point, Laura, you mentioned that this has also been sent to ISSB and IFRAG, and it would be interesting at the time that, that it is appropriate just to understand what their views may have been on this, and whether, the concerns that we raise around some of the confusion may also be discussed with them in case, they may consider how they clarify from their side as well. So that we get a balance in the wording across all of the standards, because I do think that some of the broadness in language, when we're trying to really hone in and focus, but some of the broadness in language in other standards may be contributing to some of the confusion. So it would just be interesting to understand what the thinking is in that regard.
Yeah, we can maybe discuss that in the private session, but there are differences in thinking about how this works that we can that we're not all on the same page. That's not necessarily an issue. We have different ways of doing things and different ways of thinking about these things, but we can discuss that more later. Okay, so I'm going to...
Carol,
yeah,
Sebastian, just maybe to just add one observation to this. I think the interesting thing that we're dealing with here is that both for the IFRS or the ISSB under the IFRS and the ESRS, we have to assume that the language around the scope that their standards cover is locked in, and by extension of that, also the relationship with the GRI standards. We have here the opportunity to say something about the relationship with these two standards or sets of standards, and change content potentially in our standards to express that. But there will arguably have to be also a language that sits outside the standards, that goes into more detail even than what we have in this proposed box 1 text.
yes.
So just to also remind, and I think the other thing is also knowing now that we're coming closer to the release of the two other sets of standards that will be entirely new to audiences. We will also have the benefit of the first weeks of stakeholders grappling with what is in existence in terms of explanation in these new standards on scope and all of that, and that should certainly inform the next discussion that we're having as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bastian. So I guess you're pointing to perhaps we really do need to get our act together and really clarify a view on this from our perspective of how this works and how it should work. So given that, I wonder if we should be looking at suggesting a small change in that text just to clarify what we mean by the risks and opportunities now during this meeting. Maybe what I will do is ask Lara and Bastian to maybe just think about that for us as we move on to the next item. And we might come back to this because it would help our messaging. We're getting lots of questions already about, we're using GRI standards. How do we build on that? Or how should we build on that to report against IFRS S standards? And what does this mean for our GRI reporting? And where we take it next. So I
what I would propose is that we take the feedback. I think we can recirculate a version of this. I'm not sure that in the meeting now, in the proceedings, we will come up with language that holds together, but we can certainly recirculate a proposal well ahead of the next meeting. And then we can take more feedback on this, because right now the status of this document is a staff draft. It has now been discussed for the second time with the GSB, and it can certainly influence communications materials and everything, but it is not the text that would be considered for changes to the standards just yet, for all the reasons that Laura has outlined. So yeah, I'm just also conscious of time, and that we're in these other things. I don't think we can do that in the background right now.
Okay, thank you, Bastian, for giving us that way forward. That's a good proposal. Thank you very much. So let's move on to the next item, which is the topic standard project for economic impact, and we've got Matthew back to talk to us about where that is at now.
Thanks, Carol, and good day to you and the GSSB members and our colleagues joining for this call today. So, yeah, as you mentioned, you'll be aware we have completed the draft project proposal for the review of the economic impact related to GRI standards. And so the objective of this part of today's discussion is really just to provide a very brief overview of some of the key aspects housed in the draft proposal, and then to open the floor up to the GSSB members who may have any questions or comments of the draft. And then finally, we'd like to then move on to seeking approval of this draft proposal, which will, then enable us to formally move forward with this project. So we can move on to the next slide, please, Joe. So as many of you would have already seen, the primary objective of this project is really to review the existing portfolio of GRI's economic impacts related disclosures. And essentially, we would like to develop a new set of disclosure standards that more closely represent internationally agreed best practice, and also look to align with the recent developments that are relevant in the space. So you can see here some of the instruments that we have already referenced, and these will be the key standards that will fall under this body of work. We can move to the next slide, please, Joel. So just quickly looking at how this revision will be carried out. Well, it's been a number of years since the standards in the economic impact series were last revised. Our intention here is really to then adopt a programmatic approach for the revision of these standards. And the thinking here is that this will allow us to better group related topics and subjects which fall under this theme into several distinct projects, which will at times be run concurrently, at times independently, and will enable us to then develop and integrate a new structure which we think will be more relevant for the technical content that is housed within these standards. So the proposal is that this work will take place over 3 distinct project phases, which you can see here. And the objective would then be to cover the specific thematic areas which we've touched on in our previous GSSB sessions under each phase. So in determining the ordering of the thematic areas to be covered per phase, the standards division has really considered a number of factors, which include, the external feedback that we've received from users of the GRI standards, as well as reporters, as well as the scope and complexity of the technical content to be revised within these standards. And then also, we've also thought about internally, what is GRI's positioning and what are our strategic objectives over the coming years. And this has then helped us to prioritize in this way as well. So we can move on to the next slide, please. Now, just in terms of the division of responsibilities, which we propose in the draft. So first of all, the standards division will propose that working groups be convened to support the standards division in the review and revision of these disclosures and standards. And the rationale for electing working group format is really, it provides us a way to kind of broaden our access to key experts, which will be able to contribute their insights and their technical expertise on, what I'm sure we can agree will be quite a wide range of issues that need to be covered under this portfolio of work. So the experts will be able to nominate themselves once we open our recruitment period. And in this way, they'll then be able to contribute to this project. And just to note that the working groups will be formed in accordance with our due process protocol and be able to provide all the advice and expertise that we'll need for this body of work. Just to note, I think, is that we have proposed the formation of 2 working groups across the life cycle of this portfolio of work. And this configuration was proposed for 2 reasons. So firstly, due to the extended timelines of this project, which I'll touch on in a moment, we wanted to try and take an approach to manage the scale of the time commitment, as well as ensure engagement levels are maintained amongst working group members throughout the cycle of the projects that they are involved in. And we believe having 2 working groups with separate members will ensure that this level of engagement is maintained across the project phases. Secondly, the nature of the content covered in phase 1 and phase 2 means that working group members' technical expertise in similar areas can be quite effectively utilized. And we see this approach as really allowing for more continuity across the project's first 2 phases, not only in terms of working group members, but also in terms of the development of technical content and the exchange of ideas and insights across these phases. So we can move on to the next slide, please, Jill. So, yeah, I think just before we touch on to the approvals, I think we may be missing the timeline slide, but essentially you can see in terms of the timeline is that we anticipate this will run over 36 months. And we intend to kick off this project in September of this year, so it's September 2023, where we'll kick off phase 1, looking at our economic performance standard. It's at that time that we propose opening up the recruitment phase for the first working group. And then around the end of Q1 in 2024 is when we'll kick off phase 2 of our project. And this really looks at impacts on institutions, which covers our existing standards, including lobbying, anti-competitive behavior, and anti-corruption. And then finally, at the start of 2025, we will be so it's quite a long project, but we intend to bring on board a number of additional resources to ensure that we have the capacity to cover these different phases as we go along. So just in conclusion for the presentation, I'd like to maybe take some time just to open up the floor. If any GSSB members have any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you at this point. And then Carol, you can let me know if we have quorum. Otherwise, we may need to.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for that presentation. And we've heard from you over the last few meetings and seen how these ideas have been developing. Very interesting, and some really good work gone into that. Thank you. Does any GSSB member want to ask any questions of Matthew or make any comments on this document?
Hi, this is Deborah. Just maybe as a question, as a clarification. So the bits of the standards that aren't going to be looked at and revised because they're being covered by other working groups. So like for climate change or labor. So eventually there will be changes that would come out of the other groups, so that would be in scope for the work that those groups are doing. Do you
Hi,
know
Deborah.
what I mean?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, so I think I understand the question. So both the body of work as well as the work being done currently on climate, as well as labor, there's definitely overlap and intersection. And what we as a team internally are trying to be quite deliberate about is just ensuring that we keep each other quite updated with the work that's ongoing and that covers potentially both bodies of work. Where it is relevant, we may, for instance, be involved in each other's working groups or technical committees just to understand whether certain concepts are better housed within economic impact related disclosures or labor, climate, etc. But it'll be really key, I think, just to keep quite an open line of communication, because these are being developed as we speak. But I think this gives us a good opportunity to just ensure that we do align as best possible now, rather than looking to kind of retrofit these standards down the line.
Excellent. Exactly. That was my question or concern. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Deborah, getting clarification there. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from GSSB members? So can I ask whether those present are happy to approve this document? We will contact those not present outside the meeting. Can I ask whether anybody has any concerns, and if not, we'll assume that all those present are happy to approve this project proposal. Okay, thank you. Hearing no objections, we'll take that as approved by the GSSB members present just now. Thank you. So that takes us on to our next item, which is the GSSB work programme coming back to us for approval. And Bastian is leading that discussion. Thank you, Bastian.
Thank you, Cara. And I will keep this very short. We had the opportunity to discuss feedback received, review it, and also look at specific text changes. So I want to summarize today where we landed, also reminding GSB colleagues that the work program is giving an indication of the overall ambition of the GSSB in terms of standard setting activities and support for preparers for the coming 3 years. But we have an opportunity, and I would like to emphasize that on a year-by-year basis to review our priorities. And there are multiple things that can lead to, I think, changes in priorities. There's the resourcing, the capacity issue. There are developments around GI's positioning in the landscape, and obviously the wider also sustainable development discussion and context. So we will actually approve a work program today with an indication of the ambition levels for this year as a project schedule, but also return to the discussion of the priorities for the coming year towards the end of Q3 this year already. So just to tee that up from a timeline perspective. Jill, if you can move us to the next slide. So we've gone through a public comment between November and February. We have had the chance to review and discuss, as I just mentioned, at the in-person meeting in March, and then on the 16th of May. And today we're moving this to approval. I would like to then summarize quickly the changes that have occurred so that we're all on the same page. If you can move to the next slide. We have looked specifically at the scope of the spills and leaks. This is a project. This is this is a legacy issue that actually we've been looking for maybe too long, in the sense that preparers are definitely waiting for guidance, standards from GRI. What we've looked at is originally there was a spills and leaks contents that needed to be updated. Then we have had input from also our sector pilots on critical incident management, and we're now looking to address this in the wider context also of pollution. So combining this work, it's important that we pick up a couple of threads and combine that in the project. Then we have homed in on a set of related issues that we would like to research with priority. That was indicated for 23, but we're moving this now over to 24 because of constraints in capacity. We will, of course, be following these discussions and looking to connect to stakeholders already this year, but building out a new priority for research for the year 24. And that's on this conundrum of digitalization, data protection, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and privacy. We had interesting input presentations. We had reoccurring discussions over consecutive years. And there's clearly something manifesting here that will need the attention as a new topic standard. But our research attention will gradually increase over the coming months towards actually building out sufficient capacity for background research in 24. We will also look to work with stakeholders to research more broadly new topics and look at reporting guidance for those subjects that we are likely not going to take up as part of standard setting just yet, but where there is clearly interest manifesting in understanding how the GRI standards as they stand right now, importantly also with the GRI 3, can be used for subject matters that have relevance for a larger group of companies and stakeholders. And working with colleagues in the space of international humanitarian law is an example of that, where we can develop reporting guidance and encourage the development of original work that helps companies to understand how these concepts can be applied in the reporting context, while not yet starting a project on or standard setting activity from GRI's perspective. And then the last mentioning is to the sector standard project for food and beverages, which has now been moved to 24. And the reason for that is that we're rebuilding capacity in the sector team, and if under ideal circumstance in terms of staffing, we would have been able to move on this project this year. Now, with the hiring schedule and everything, now success rates in closing this in a timely fashion, we're looking to push this out to commence next year. Moving to the next slide. When you look at the overall, sorry, there was a question. I don't want to.
No, carry on, Bastian. I'm just conscious of time.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So what we're going to do with the work program is there was no change in the overall setup. The areas of work are the same. We've clarified some of the language, made sure that now everything is presentable also as a reference document for stakeholders when they want to engage with GRI. And we've locked in, and that's the next slide, also the preamble text. Can we just have a quick look at that as well? Next slide, please. I don't see them moving. Maybe that's just my technical setup, but there we are. So this is the opening paragraph of the preamble. There is, of course, a wider set of observations in the preamble to the work program, I just would like to highlight that the preamble also is a very strong commitment towards collaboration with regional and national standard setters, with the colleagues specifically in the EU context, where we now see adoption of GRI's original work in terms of manifesting the impact perspective in corporate reporting, and we want to stay close to this and be supportive of this. I would also include, of course, the colleagues at the ISSB with their work. We're flagging that up prominently to say that it is the GSSB's view to be collaborative and enhancing and evolving the overall perspective on corporate reporting together with all these players. Then I think what's left for today, also looking at time, is the approval of this. Is the next slide, and similar to what we've done with the earlier approval, we can only get the feedback now of those that are in the call, and if we need to get to quorum and have to solicit feedback from the other members, that is something we will do.
Thank you, Bastian. Are there any comments or questions on the work programme?
No comments on the work program, but regarding the preamble, no, I have a question because we have highlighted human rights as a specific issue in the preambles of the standard. So I was just thinking whether we should include that very specifically in the preamble.
Well, I guess this is a work program rather than a standard. Does anybody else have a view on this? How important, Bastian, is it to be able to know that this is it and get on with this very shortly, this work program?
So Miriam, can you just what is the ask? Is it a change in the text, or is it?
Yeah, I think Joseph is questioning whether I mean, it does reference human rights in the second paragraph of the preamble. Yes, what is it exactly, Joseph, you're looking for?
Sorry, is human rights specifically mentioned in the second paragraph? Sorry, then I missed it out. If it is already mentioned, then it's fine.
Yeah, no, it is as part of the instruments. It's specifically mentioned. Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other comments, Julia?
Yes, Carol, thank you. I have only a question. We have decided at least to maintain renewable and utilities separate sector in the work program, Bastian. Because if I remember correctly, you are checking if maintain utilities and renewables separate because we have another option.
Yes. So what we've done is we maintained the distinction, but I think there is an important point about looking to. So we have the opportunity to open up the individual sector definition. So we have a GI sector project for utilities, right? Mm-hmm. Which includes the electricity generation except renewables, and then we have one for renewable energy separate to this. But when we come to that evaluation point, and with the priority discussion for next year, I think also with emerging discussions on classifications, evolving discussions on classifications in different jurisdictions and everything, we will keep coming back to this. For now, we've kept them separate and this is the table on, page 11 of the work program.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're happy with that, Julia? That is a want to start next year rather than this year?
Yes, it's not a problem because we have to work in the next year, but I think that it's important that we discuss again at the beginning of the next year because it's an important topic.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. And Jeff?
Yeah, not a comment on the work program, but rather on the quorum. I think we actually have quorum, Carol. Even if Anna's off, we have 11, including Anna. So just a procedural note there.
Thank you. And Gillian is keeping an eye on this as well. So
yeah, normally we have to have 12 for quorum. It's a bit of an.
So yeah, thank you. So what I'll do is ask if people here are happy to approve this work program, and we'll contact the members not here electronically. So can I ask whether anybody has any issues with this work program to speak now? And if not, I'll take it that the people attending the meeting are happy to approve it. Okay, thank you. And can I do the same with the minutes of the previous meeting that we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting? Can I ask if everybody here is happy to approve it? If I don't hear any objections, I'll assume that that's a yes. Okay, no hands and no objections. Thank you all. So I think that then is there any other business? Okay, thank you. So we will then close the public part of the meeting and move into our private session. Thank you all.